Spectrum of Death by Morbid Saint. Everyone, Mike here with Extreme Metal Magazine. Welcome back to another video. Now, be honest, had you heard of this album? I have heard of it a little bit over the years, and it's one of those albums where I listened to it and then I kind of forgot about it. And recently, within about the last couple of years, I had a chance to go back to listen to this album. And I just want to say that it is probably one of the most fastest, aggressive thrash death albums out there. It is absolutely brutal, released in 1989. Now, Spectrum of Death is actually a reissue of the 1988 demo Lock Up Your Children by Morbid Saint, but it is a explosion of sound. It's 8 songs, which leads me to believe that maybe there's something magical about 8 songs. Master of Puppets had 8 songs, right? The Lightning had 8 songs. I really like 8 as a number for a record to have, and this number has it. Now, again, right off the bat, when you listen to it, at least for myself, I can usually tell right away if I like an album or if I'm going to like an album. Not necessarily saying always by that first track, but usually when that first thing kicks in, that first beat, that first abrasive guitar sound, whatever you want to call it, the vocals, I usually can tell if I'm going to like it or I don't like it. And from that first song, when it kicks in, just the power, the vocals, the vocalist, the lead singer in this band, the vocals are so aggressive. Reminds me of Millie from Creator. And, there's also some songs on it that sound very similar to Dark Angel, but no offense to Dark Angel. One of my complaints is I just never cared for the vocals too much on Dark Angel. The speed was there, the power was there, but I just didn't really care for the vocals. And the vocals are important to me, because that really also sets the tone. And the vocals in this band from 1989 are extremely harsh, abrasive, and it's what I would expect from a cover like this. You see this cover behind me. I think someone in the comments on one of their YouTube videos said the cover, the lead singer sounds exactly like what the cover looks like a demon. Really think that's an important sound. And again, this is just such a gem that I never hear talked about much. I never see online. Now, this band has released a couple albums in recent years, one in 2024 and one in 2019, I believe. So I'll be curious to go back and listen to those. I have not really listened to those, but right now I'm focused on Spectrum of Death. I'm actually listening to it, enjoying it, working out to it, running to it. It's a phenomenal album, and it's a shame that this band did disband, and not really certain what happened to them. Probably they went back and had normal jobs, but it's a shame they didn't continue on because they were definitely onto something. Now, something that's interesting here, and I will be covering this more on this YouTube channel, is the idea of death thrash. It may be my favorite genre, this idea of thrash metal that borders on death metal. So when we're talking about death thrash, we're talking about extremely aggressive thrash metal. This isn't Megadeth thrash metal. I'm not trying to be insulting to Megadeth. This isn't Anthrax thrash metal. I'm not trying to be insulting to Anthrax, but this is thrash metal that pushes the limits of what the genre had either intended to be or what could possibly be. So I think death thrash for myself may be my favorite genre. I love death metal. I love thrash metal. It's a merging of the two. This seems to be that beautiful birth of it. So again, Spectrum of Death. I'm curious what your thoughts are on it. I think it may be one of the most aggressive thrash metal albums ever, if we're calling it that. It's an aggressive album nonetheless. If it's in the death metal category, it's extremely aggressive album. If it's in the thrash metal category, it's towards the very top. Some of the only things that I can think maybe more aggressive are Pleasure to Kill by Creator or Rain and Blood by Slayer. Now, it does sound like it was inspired by Pleasure to Kill, and this came out a few years after Pleasure to Kill, which came out in 1986, but who cares? This is a unique sound, and I think extreme metal bands, if you're studying a sound, this is what I would produce if I was coming up with a death metal, thrash metal band. These are the places that I would visit vocally, the sound. it's just got that 1980s sound. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we can return to that sound, but it just possesses that magical sound where it's extremely harsh, it's extremely abrasive, but you can still hear the instruments, you can still make out the vocals, and it's just everything seems just about right. It's not overproduced. I hate the new modern clean sound. I just want to emphasize that again. I cannot stand the new modern clean sound. I want bands to sound raw and dirty, but not too raw and dirty to the point where we can't hear what's going on. Carcass, some of their early albums, if we'll be covering that in some future videos, but there can be a point when it's just too raw to where you can't hear anything. It's just a wall of sound that is completely nothing. Even a metalhead will not be able to find the joy or the beauty in that wall of sound. But this album, Spectrum of Death, I think they really hit it. And an interesting side note, it was produced by Eric Grief, who was the longtime manager of Chuck Schuldiner of Death. Death is my favorite death metal band of all time. Chuck remains a musical legend, musical hero to myself to this day. And it's interesting to note that Eric Grief, sadly, he passed away back in 2021. I was very saddened to hear that. He had a big impact on the extreme metal community, but it's interesting that he produced this. Maybe he was onto something. Maybe he really scouted them and knew their talent. But it's interesting side note. I never knew that until doing a little bit of research for this video. But nonetheless, Spectrum of Death by Morbid Saint. I think it's one of the most aggressive, abrasive, extreme metal albums that you're ever going to hear. Love to hear your thoughts on this down in the comment section down below. Appreciate the support, and as always, stay metal.